How do you reintroduce a character that people already know and love? A few series have done it as they create reboots of their franchises. The Legend of Zelda games don't all follow the same timeline while still keeping Link as the hero. Superheroes like Spider-Man have had many different reincarnations. And the same goes for Tomb Raider. The Tomb Raider series of video games has been rebooted twice for 3 different timelines of our favorite British archaeologist heroine, Lara Croft. When a reboot gets made, there are obviously always going to be some changes, otherwise there wouldn't really be a point. And it's really interesting to take a look at how not only the plot and world change, but also the characters. They've had to make each Lara Croft distinct from the last while remaining the same person after all. So I thought I'd take a look at how the Tomb Raider games have reintroduced Lara Croft to the world twice, and do a bit of a comparison to see the different ways they wanted the world to meet this character while still keeping her recognizable to those who knew her before. I will only be referencing information given in Tomb Raider Legend for that series, and the first game of the Survivor reboot, the 2013 Tomb Raider for the second reboot series. I will also be using a bit of information found in the first comic omnibus for that series, but I will not be using information from the sequel games for either timeline, as I want to focus mostly on how they introduced the character of Lara Croft, rather than how they presented her entire story. There's definitely an immediate difference you can sense by looking at the games with even a quick glance. As it came out in 2006, Legend gives off an early 2000s action star energy, a contrast to the way Survivor perfectly fits in with other more dark and serious games from 2013, like The Last of Us. You know, Survivor is rated M for maniac cultists, while Legend is rated T for toned down. Both games kind of start the same way though. You just jump right into the action and learn about Lara slowly as you go along, instead of being treated to a lot of information and context close to the beginning. A big difference is that Survivor is an origin story, while Legend, like the original series, starts the story in the middle of Lara's career. So in Survivor, as you might guess by this timeline's name, Lara's motivation is survival when we meet her, because she's trapped on an island filled with cult members trying to kill her and her friends. The motivation we see for Lara in Legend is that she's looking for something important, which we soon learn is what killed her mother when Lara was young. And these differences in experience and motivation definitely provide some interesting differences in her character. Legend Lara is very witty and confident. She loves dangerous situations and always has a bit of humor to dish out, even when things are quite serious. Survivor Lara is a little more reserved and wary of situations. She's never experienced danger like this before, while Legend Lara is very familiar with it. You can see it's all more emotionally taxing on her. When we kill someone as Lara for the first time in Survivor, she cries and needs some reassurance. But when we first encounter enemies to kill in Legend, it's all bang bang pow without a second thought. All Survivor Lara wanted was to go on this expedition to help film an archaeology TV show, fresh out of graduating from UCL and ready to start a career, not have to fight for her life and confront the fact that the supernatural are real. Meanwhile, her previous reincarnation sees giant monsters killing people and doesn't think much of the fact that it's so mythical. We're made to assume that this is totally normal for her. Of course, most of those things I mentioned could all be considered circumstantial differences, affected purely by how much experience they each have. Maybe Survivor Lara would become just as casual towards danger as Legend Lara once she's lived as long as her. But there are plenty of differences that aren't related to when/where we start the story. Outside of stopping baddies and finding treasure, how do they live their lives? What defines their personality? Survivor Lara has a distaste for wearing dresses and heels, as seen in the comics, but Legend Lara isn't shy of dressing up for a fancy event. Survivor reads at parties. Legend says,
"It's not a party until something gets broken."
A lot about Legend is a lot more flashy in that way, again playing into the 2000s action movie style it has. She uses high-tech gear, loves motorcycles, and her version of Croft Manor looks almost like a castle, complete with a techie hub for her pals to research from, radio her, and see a live video feed of everything she's doing. But Survivor Lara, well, she still follows the Lara Croft tradition of descending from aristocracy and wealth, doesn't use her money on expensive adventuring gear like that. She lives like a normal college student, briefly mentioning a job at the Nine Bells, which sounds like a small pub. She doesn't touch the wealth left by her parents. Because in many ways, I think they wanted the latest Lara to feel more like she could be a pretty realistic person. Even if she's ahead of the game by having already taken part in gymnastics, archery, and a rifle club, and having been taught rock climbing and survival skills before she ever needed to actually use any of these abilities to survive, the way her life is a lot less exaggerated from the Legend series helps her feel more real. When we're introduced to her story, we see she never asked to get into trouble. She gets hurt all the time. She makes decisions that those older than her think are foolish, and she does pay the price at times. Quite differently, Legend Lara is a bit more of a sunglasses, slow motion, walking away from an explosion type of character. She actively gets wrapped up in trouble, and she can get away with almost anything. You know, she dual wields pistols, which is definitely more over the top than practical. But Survivor Lara starts with a bow and arrows, often taking a more silent approach to attack. You could say that Legend Lara fights like she has nothing to lose. Survivor Lara's story is all about not losing things. Despite all these variances, in many ways the two new Laras were introduced with a similar portrayal. They both are seen to know multiple languages, can do some gymnastics, adore all things archaeology, and are consequently filled with knowledge about pretty much anything historical they come across. They're never afraid to speak their mind, or even dish out some insults if they feel like it. They both tend to act independently, often preferring to face dangers on their own than risk another person going down with her. They also do their best to make sure no one gets left behind, but know their limits to save themselves so there are no more deaths than can be helped. Their sense of relentless heroism is the same, even if they have different methods and goals. When we first meet Lara in each of these games, we see she'll really stop at nothing to get to what she needs. Survivor Lara will climb on a very precarious, dilapidated airplane to cross a chasm to find her friends and escape alongside them. She doesn't wait for help or take the time to figure out a safer way across. And likewise, Legend Lara will fight past armed men and leopards to find more information about what she saw happen as a child. She doesn't wait for them to leave and risk losing her chance or give up on her main motivation because of it. So we see, while they're both scholars, they'd rather charge ahead than wait and plan things out a little bit more. Outside of these similar personality aspects, of course their appearance is nearly identical, though they definitely look different due to the styles each game was made in. And they're personally my top 2 Lara designs of all time. Honorable mention to Preteen Raider because, duh, that's hilarious. I think both reboots changed things up to make new Lara look different from how the original was first shown, making it really feel like a new era, even though she's still very obviously Lara Croft just by looking at her. And both of the reboot Lara's backstories are rather similar too. Dead parents, a father that believed in something that others thought wasn't true, growing up around archaeology and adventure. It's implied that Legend Lara learned most of what she knows from her father, and similarly, Survivor Lara learned most of what she knows from her father figure, Roth. Along those lines, some other characters are similar through the 2 series as well, even if they aren't the same character in the way that Lara Croft is. Engineer Anaya is similar to Engineer Reyes, or Lara's friendship with Anaya could be compared to her friendship with Sam. Characters like Roth and Alex talk to Lara on walkie-talkies in Survivor, just as Lara's employees Zip and Alistair do in Legend. So as they reintroduced Lara for a 3rd time, they kept more similar themes outside of just Lara herself. Whether this was intentional or not, it helps keep things feel familiar as you go between these very different timelines. The Survivor reintroduction is drastically different in many ways, but it has similar themes to the Legend reintroduction. It keeps it all still feeling very Tomb Raider. Well, I've looked at a lot of different areas of similarities and differences between the 2nd and 3rd Lara Crofts. After all that, can I say either reboot is better? Personally, I think both interpretations of the classic character are totally fine. They had to change elements of the classic Lara Croft to portray a darker origin story in Survivor, while Legend was able to stay more similar to the original because the story was lighter and contained more humor between the extra dramatic parts. And I think some of the changes they made in the latest series were also to appeal to a wider audience. By making her less stylized in many ways, they could grab the attention of gamers who prefer more realistic and considerably less objectified female heroes. That's mainly just a visual change, of course. Lara has always been a strong, independent woman type of character. She saves the boys, not the other way around, and they always treat her with complete respect in the Legend series. So by just giving her a more reasonable outfit for going on an expedition, you can immediately gain more approval from the players uninterested in unnecessary short shorts, while proving that doing so doesn't alienate an audience that might enjoy starting video games because they think the main character is hot or whatever, considering the fandom I've seen for the Survivor series. The new Lara was made in a way to adapt to the changing video game market, where a video game character's outfit has to be more reasonable to the circumstance to be considered more respectable, you could say. You can see this happen in quite a few games. They realized Jill Valentine from Resident Evil shouldn't fight zombies in a tube top. Sonya Blade from Mortal Kombat needs an actual shirt under that vest if she wants to stay in the army. Dramatized outfits belong on dramatized characters, not more practical fighters like Lara Croft. As different as each of the Tomb Raider remakes are from each other, I really like both of their Lara Crofts. It's fun to see two different versions of the character's story, an inexperienced and fearful Lara gaining skills and confidence as she fights to save her and her friends' lives, an experienced Lara who has it all but is desperately searching for what she lost long ago. Telling these different stories requires that they change her behavior and tools of the trade, but that they keep her the familiar, intelligent, and fierce British explorer that the video game world has loved for years. They're both excellent, but I think that if you're going to play both of the Reboot series, starting with the more recent Survivor series is a better start to be introduced to Lara. Going from the troubled college student to the much more cocky adventurer extraordinaire is less jarring than going the other way around. It's a great way to get invested into the character, and then you can play Legend to have a little more fun with the character. And if you have played these games already, what do you think? Did the first game of each of the two Reboot series of Tomb Raider do a good job at introducing Lara Croft to players? They both made me interested to see where the rest of both stories went next, and I enjoyed both different interpretations of what Lara Croft could become depending on what happens in her life before and during the events of the game. I don't think they changed her too much or anything. I think Survivor ultimately gives more information in the first game about Lara, which is nice, but Legend still introduces a compelling character, aided by her more wild way of doing things. Both reboots have been successful at starting a new series for Lara, and it will be interesting to see how long the current one goes before they inevitably restart her life story once again. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you found this comparison interesting. And if you want to subscribe to my channel, I make videos like this all the time. I hope you all have a very groovy day.
You're such a tourist!